Hi guys, this is Slusher. I'm bringing to you today the first ever recorded episode of the XHBK Slusher podcast. You're probably or maybe listening to this second as we decided to make and release an introduction episode first, so that one has already been posted. But this was actually recorded before that. It's the first episode we ever recorded, and so here it is. It's because we're almost at the end of the 2010s, we did a top 10 list of games released this decade. There'll be a little more in the actual recorded intro later, but I just wanted to add that in deliberating, which we recorded the entire deliberation, it ended up taking roughly 4 hours, and so the recording ended up being super long. And I'll post the raw deliberations as well in case you are interested in listening to them. But this is a more edited down, cut down version just of the actual top 10 lists themselves. So I do hope you enjoy it. If you are interested in listening to the deliberation of all of the games, I'll be posting that in the next couple of days in an unedited raw format.
Hey, alright, so recently on Twitter there was kind of this thread going around where it was, or hashtag I guess is a better way to put it, there was a hashtag going around where it was top 10 games of the decade, since there's only about 3 months essentially. Well, at the time it was literally 3 months left in the decade. So you can pretty much tell there's only maybe 1 or 2 games coming out between now and the end of the year that you would consider for this kind of a thing. So
yeah, very limited.
Yeah, so for that reason, people are going through and making their lists ahead of time before it ended, and so we thought we'd make a video about games that came out in 2010.
Yep. From the last decade, basically. This is going to be kind of we review those games. Not all of them will be games that we even got to own. Some might just be notable and quick mention.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about actually what you just mentioned, games owning or not owning games, in the sense that there's a couple things that I came across about myself that I hadn't thought about from making my list, which is that I was like a very games as a service person for the first half of this decade, where I was probably playing like the same game for the majority of the year at that time, for most of the time, and so the number of games, different games that I tried from like 2015 to 2019 is much larger than the number of games that I tried from 2010 until 2015. So there was that issue. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention was that I never owned a PlayStation 3, and I don't own a PlayStation 4, because at the time when the PlayStation 4 came out, it just wasn't economical for me to have both.
Yeah.
And now that I could afford both, it's kind of like been in a holding pattern of, well, PlayStation 5 is in 2 years. Well, PlayStation 5 is in 1 year. And so I keep putting it off, even though there are definitely games for PlayStation 5 that I really want to play. And those will be on like the recap list, but unfortunately they're not going to make my top 10 list for that matter.
Right. I'm in the same boat. I own a PlayStation 4. That's the only difference there. I don't own a PlayStation 3. It's one of the only systems besides a handheld system like 3DS. It's one of the only systems I haven't owned. I usually try to get every system. I will say, I think it was good to get the PS4 because I got exclusives that I didn't want to miss, where PS3, there was a lot less. There was stuff missed, but a lot less. If I hadn't gotten a PS4, I would have missed quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, I definitely... There are definitely PlayStation 4 games that I'm looking forward to buying and playing on PlayStation 5, assuming it's backwards compatible. Which I think the word right now is that it will be.
Yeah, if they at this point they've got to. I think they learn from mistakes or lack of doing that in the past.
Yeah, so I'm definitely planning and looking forward to playing some of those, but for the purpose of this list, I just want to admit ahead of time, I haven't. Yeah. And as much as I wish that was true, that's where we're at.
Yep. Also, when it comes to this list, I think we both have some of our own individual opinions or rules for what we wanted to include or maybe exclude. So, for example, for me, I had some when it comes to sequels.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about sequels, which is to say, especially for, not so much for the notable list, but especially for the top 10 list, I really didn't feel like putting multiple versions of the same franchise on there. And so I'll go into it at the time when we get to the top 10 list, but for specifics on this where it comes up. But what I'm trying to get at is I will either put my favorite from the franchise in the decade, or if there's a specific reason why it's different than that, and I'll bring it up at the time, then. But in other words, even if like there are two games from the same franchise that really are probably two of the best games, in most cases I tried to include only one.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. There's definitely a case where I would have put two games in the decade on my top 10 list, but it's the same franchise. I didn't want to include both because I felt like that was taking away from something else. I also had a kind of side rule where I almost didn't want to use, I only wanted to use the first game of the franchise or IP. There's just, my exception to that rule was if that sequel took that game to a whole nother level, where it changed the gameplay or changed everything to such a dramatic effect, or almost reboot within the current numbering system, then I felt like that went on. But it usually would, in that case, go on at the cost of the first game not being on.
These are not in a particular order, although I think we were going to do a top 3 ordered,
we'll do that. Yep.
But just top 10 for the rest of them. Man, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with the ordered part, but I feel comfortable with the top 10 part.
Yeah, mine's in order of, when I list mine, it's in order of release year, so, and I'm still going to feel like, man, is that fair? This was hard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I can start. I'll do my, I'll do my 7 games that are unordered, and I'll give you my top 3. So 7 games unordered that make my top 10 list. Celeste. This game is the game that taught me how much I like playing high execution platforming. I used to think when I saw people play like I Want to Be the Guy or I Want to Be the Boshi or Super Meat Boy, I didn't get it. I was like, why would you want to do this? But this game taught me, holy shit, it's actually really rewarding. It feels so good when you beat a screen that you've been stuck on for a long time. And like, it's like not that big of a deal when you die if the game just is like, alright, you get to try again like a millisecond later. It's not like you have to sit through a cutscene again, boom, you're in the game instantly. It's almost like when you jumped and missed, you landed on the first platform of the screen because you're there that fast. And so I was just like, man, this game is so good. It's so fun. The levels are really well designed. The gameplay is really cool and gets, like, they add, like, things, like every major level, like every new zone, I guess you would call it, section of levels, adds like, hey, now this mechanic exists.
Right.
And
yeah,
it's so
I like
good.
That style a lot.
The graphics, they're pixelated, so they're not like what someone would call amazing graphics, but I love the way they look. The story is really good. The music is amazing. Really extremely good music. Including when you unlock hard mode, all the music is remixes of the old music, and the remixes are really good. So the game is incredible. It recently got free DLC of a whole new zone, which it just came out this month in September, which is a packed month like we've talked about, so I haven't gone back and played it yet, because it's probably going to take a while, because I've heard it's harder than the hard mode, which means it's very hard. But I'm looking forward to it for sure. After that, I have Marvel Heroes, Breath of the Wild, Splatoon 2. Yeah, it's not the original. They're really the same game. Splatoon's just definitively better version, so it's hard to...
I have one definitely in that category.
Yeah. It's really just an overall... It's really Splatoon 1, but like with improvements all around and a new story. This is what I wanted to mention earlier when we talked about it, and I said I'll touch on the story later, which is that yes, the story in Splatoon is long. Splatoon 2 is longer than the story in Splatoon 1, but to be completely honest with you, I had a hard time beating the story in this because I was so much more interested in playing multiplayer that I put it off for a very long time. Eventually I did go back and beat it. but I never I never bought the expansion pass for that reason, because I was just like, do I really want to? Because they made an expansion that was story content, kind of. But I was like, it took me so long to beat the story in this because I enjoy every time I turn on the game. I just want to play multiplayer matches. Grand Theft Auto 5, Mortal Kombat 9. Now this one's the one I want to make an explanation of, which is I put Mortal Kombat 9 on the list because of what it did. It brought Mortal Kombat back to the limelight, and it also redefined what is acceptable for single player content in a fighting game.
With movie-like story transitions.
I definitely don't think it's the best NetherRealm game this decade.
Right.
But it changed everything.
Okay.
And so for that reason, I went with Mortal Kombat 9 as my choice.
We wouldn't have the best NetherRealm game this decade if that didn't exist.
Exactly. And then the last one on my 7 unordered top 10 is Resident Evil 7. And then my top 3, these are ordered. Third place was Ori and the Blind Forest. This is a 2D platformer, although it's more of a Metroid game than it is a platformer. It just, I guess you would call it a platformer because there's not a lot of combat. Man, what can I say? This game is really good. It's not an indie game by any means because it's made by Microsoft, but it's kind of got that look and feel to it. Just not much else I really want to say. I feel like I should talk about it for longer because of how much I like this game, and it's a lot. But yeah, it's just a really good 2D style Metroid game that's more about exploration than combat, but I guess that's kind of true of Metroid in general. Really, it's mostly, there's some really good boss fights, so I don't want to discount the combat completely, but I've really argued with myself whether to put Ori or Celeste here, because they're both the same genre, kind of, even though Ori is a little more Metroidvania. But I just feel like overall, Ori was the better game. That's not saying much because Ori is such a good game. But yeah, that was my ultimate decision. It was hard, but that was my ultimate decision. Second place was Fire Emblem Three Houses. This game is really good, actually. Now, I will take umbrage with one thing, is that I read a lot of reviews, and then I heard through word of mouth that the reviews were not lying. That not only is there 3 different houses that you can play as, and they all have different stories, but they're each 80 hours long. My playthrough was roughly 50 hours, so it's shorter. Is this a qualm? No, 50 hours is obviously enough. But I just want to put out there is a rumor that it takes 80 hours, and I felt like I did everything, like including, I like this game so much that if there was an optional thing that you could go into, like gardening and fishing and stuff like that, I did all of it. I talked to all of my students every single time that you could. I did all that stuff, and I still only managed to make it 50 hours. I'm not upset about this. I will say it tricked me, because I got to the final mission of my story, and I was expecting a twist ending, because it was like, oh, this is the final battle. And I was like, well, I'm only at 50 hours.
Yeah.
And I've heard from sources that the reviews were correct. It does take 80 hours. So I was expecting there to be a twist, and then when I killed the last person in the final battle that it told me was the final battle, and the person actually just died,
It's over.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's cool. There's still 2 houses left. I'm probably going to wait until the winter drought to do those 2. I'm definitely going to, because it's a really good game. But at 40 hours a pop in the Christmas season with all the games coming out, I just feel like I'm going to put it off until then better. Yeah, this game really, I think when I was about halfway through my first playthrough, I said something to you about this, where I said, I really like Fire Emblem, and I think it has a chance to be one of my favorite games of all time. And yeah, I mean, it just is. I think the top 4, which I know the last 7 aren't supposed to be ordered, but I think if you include Celeste, I think all of these qualify for entering my favorite game of all time list. But yeah, Fire Emblem Three Houses, really, really good game. And then number one is Undertale. This game, man, I love this game. First of all, I'm one of those people who like it. Not that that's uncommon. A lot of people really like this game, but I like this game to the point where since this game came out, most games that I've played at some point, I think about like how is this game compared to Undertale. Where it's a little bit weird to say that because it's kind of unique, so it's not really normal compared to Undertale, but it was more like Undertale was just kind of like, a game can follow this story, or a game can it can look at things this way, and it was like, oh, you're right, it can. And so moving forward, I just thought about games differently, where it's like things don't always have to be done this way or that way. And so, yeah, it's as unique of a game as it is, or, well, different, I should say, maybe, because it's not really unique. It's a turn-based RPG. But as different and out of the box as it is, it really it forces me to compare every game I played since then to it.
Which is really good.
Whether it's even remotely in the same genre or not, I think about the game in comparison to Undertale.
Which that should be. That I can make a similar kind of comment there. So yeah. All right. So I'm gonna read mine kind of different because I didn't order them all through 10, and I think that would be too hard for me to even do.
Oh no!
I mean, I know yours wasn't supposed to be taken seriously, but I'm going to read mine. What I should say is I'm going to list mine, including the top 3, and then go back and say which the top 3 were, because it's just easier for me. It's in order of year. So first on my list in 2010 was Castlevania Lords of Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Castlevania Lords of Shadow is the first Castlevania game after, I can't think of the name of the developer that took it over.
Well, I think more notably, it's the first Castlevania in a long time at that point that wasn't mimicking the Symphony of the Night formula.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a true reboot. What I would say, and this may make some people like it more or like it not want to try it more, is it is a very... It's like it's on its way to becoming a Souls game or a From Software game. Because the combat, it's hard, and the combat is kind of similar. It's a little bit more forgiving, I would say. So it shouldn't turn you off if you think it's going to be a hard game like that. But that's what I really liked about it, is the combo style and the depth of combat. And has a great story. For its time, the graphics were great. Like I said, it's a reboot, so you can get into the series from this game. One last thing I'll say about this, just for me as a person, Castlevania is one of my favorite genres of all time, but I actually didn't get into it in Nintendo. I don't think I played the Nintendo Castlevania right away. It's just my first long-term Castlevania was actually for the Game Boy.
Yeah, the DS ones. Those are really good.
I always liked the music in them, and I knew of the music, but that game I played from start to finish, basically. And
yeah, it could. Unfortunately, this could devolve, so I don't want to go into it. But yeah, the DS, when Castlevania moved to Game Boy as its primary delivery device, that timeline was really strong for the game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people didn't follow it out because both Lords of Shadow and the follow-up, which we'll talk about later, weren't nearly as critically acclaimed, because it was kind of like, why move away from the Symphony of the Night formula when you don't have to, or, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think the results were good.
Yeah, I think it was mixed reviews, but I think it's aged well. It's, in my opinion, a successful reboot. I'm sad that they haven't kept going with that and it wasn't able to. Second on my list, this is the one, and this is part of why I wanted to read it like this, is Red Dead Redemption in 2010. This is the hardest one for me because this is here, this does mean Red Dead Redemption 2 is not here. So, and I do think they're interchangeable in that regard. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a better game. It's just, it was hard for me to fairly score a sequel in there because we wouldn't have 2 without 1. And I think they play similar enough. 2 is better in every way, but they play similar enough where I couldn't give 2 the edge on that, to be fair. Third in the list, not in order, Arkham City, Batman Arkham City. That one, based on what I just talked about, did meet my requirement. Batman Arkham Asylum was obviously the first one, so this is the second one in the series. But this is perfection upon an already really good formula. I'll even, because we're going to talk about this probably more later, what I'll say right now is the one negative I actually have associated with these games is they didn't introduce it. Maybe they did. We got detective mode from this series, and that's the only negative. It works very well in this game, so I'm not taking... I
think detective mode overall is good, but the implementation is often bad or required.
Here's my problem with detective mode. In a game, and this was one of them, even though I'm not holding it against this game, in a game where you have to find hidden items, it's often better to have detective mode on to find those items, and then you're playing a beautiful looking game, but 90% of the time you're in a X-ray vision mode or something, and you're not getting to appreciate how good the game looks. Arkham City is like it took a kind of linear confined area in Arkham Asylum, which was a great game, but it gave you not enough where it's a sandbox kind of clone or whatever you want to call it. It kind of is a sandbox, but not really. It doesn't have the objectives on your map kind of thing. It's got it's linear enough, but it's not sandboxy enough too. And it's just Batman perfection basically. And the fact that you can glide around the city, the travel is unique to that game, and I've never seen any other game do anything like that. It's just everything you do in that game, solving things, combat, travel, the Riddler. Oh my, that game, that's actually why I give it over Arkham Asylum as far as in that genre is, or trilogy is, that's when they made the Riddler, the puzzle aspect completely. In the previous game, he was just collectibles. In this game, he's collectibles, but he's also about more than 50% of them are very tricky puzzles to get to that collectible. And then every 25% of the total ones you find, you have to deal with him. And it's just phenomenal. So that was the 3rd out of 10. 4th out of 10 is Mortal Kombat. I also had on my list. And Mortal Kombat 9, really technically just called Mortal Kombat. It's just numerically it's the 9th game in their series, and it was a reboot, but that's the easiest way to identify it. That changed me. Kind of what Slush was saying earlier is we both just kind of played fighting games against each other, especially up to this point.
Yes.
Before this game came out, I was not competitive. It was, except for with my friends.
Yeah.
And
it's not weird for us to play, like, we've literally played best to 100s in Soul Calibur 2. Yep. But playing against other people or in tournaments was not a thing.
Yeah, didn't seek it out, didn't really know the scene. Because of this game, and I'm probably going to spend the most on this, even though I loved Arkham City, because of this game this year, everything changed for me. They had great marketing, first of all. And leading up to the release of the game, they had streams, they had hype, and that got me actually into watching Twitch more than Twitch was pretty new at this time for the casual person. That got me into watching Twitch, I think, more than anything else. And as that happened, by the time the game came out, I decided, man, I've never really been good at a fighting game before. I want to try, and I had the time at that point when the game was coming out to try and put in whatever work I needed to do to see how good I could get. And that's what Mortal Kombat 9 is a special game for me for that reason, because I was terrible at first. And then I read things, I watched streams. Really watching tournaments was huge for me. And the sheer amount that I watched did more for me almost than reading about things, because it was just seeing the stuff on repetition as far as what people would do and movements and listening to some really great commentators. And I was terrible, but I just, one of the pat on the backs I might give myself is I actually just kept going. Usually I quit, and I failed and had a terrible record. And then this game turned out to be, I got really good at it. I actually got matched up with some weird flex here coming, but I got matched up against some actual pros on Xbox Live, and I won a few of them, and some of them handily, and that, it just was huge. It was a huge turning point for me with fighting games, and I never made it to tournaments ever, but this made me want to actually compete. And in this game, I think I would have done well and could have.
Okay.
And then also notable about it, side thing, is this is the first time they did a true story campaign, which changed the game.
Yeah, this changed the game for what is acceptable for single-player content in a fighting game.
I echo everything that you said with the added, for me, it changed fighting games competitively for me too.
Sure.
But everything else I completely agree with that you said. 2013 Marvel Heroes. that should be obvious if anybody knows me at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I want to actually talk about this because I think I talked about it enough on my list.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice that, well, I guess I haven't heard your whole list yet, but you'll notice that this is the only, like, online game of a service that's on either of our lists. Am I mistaken?
I can say that too, yeah.
Okay. And, like, definitely we played other ones that happened.
Yeah.
Like, both of us have played WoW, although that didn't come out this decade.
But there were other, like, Diablo 3 came out.
Yeah, Diablo
and
3 came out.
completely got better in this decade.
Yeah, so, like, it's definitely not the only online game as a service that we played this decade. But for us, it really stuck out for a couple reasons. One being, you can't play it anymore, and there doesn't exist anything that replaces it for me. Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 is, like, the best you could possibly ask for.
And it's still not.
It's still just not the same game.
And that's not a slant against the game. It's
Yeah.
just, I don't know if we'll ever have anything like that again.
And so it's really unfortunate that it's gone because it was at the end, obviously on release, but at the end, just a really fun game that made you really brought the Marvel playing as a Marvel character fantasy to life.
And it was the development team did the perfect amount of taking feedback, I would say, because you got to see a lot of things that were in, like, a new character would come out and they would have a signature move that was actually a Marvel vs. Capcom move, or they would have a move that was in the movie, or they would combine a lot of those things really well, and then they also had to balance that into just this character play.
Yeah, and the characters were deep, like Marvel vs. Capcom, or Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, you essentially have 4 moves per character. This game, you have skill trees where you can learn different moves.
Yeah.
There's like 20 moves per character, and they all feel like they belong to the character.
The Ultimate Alliances were never about that. The last one was also 4 moves, but even when you could add and replace moves, that wasn't a true skill tree, and that's what I loved, is you could make your builds, and there was gear that mattered. That's not a thing those games didn't do.
I just wanted to touch on that since it's kind of unique in being the online service game that made both of our lists.
And really, honestly, the entirety of that game, not only did the game get better, but every aspect of the game got better.
Oh yeah.
The flow of the game, the quality of life of the game, the art of the game got insanely good.
Yeah.
From the beginning, which wasn't necessarily bad. Some of the style I didn't like, but it was just graphically even got better as well, in addition to the art style. All right, so we're almost halfway there. This is the halfway point for me. Number 5 is GTA 5. Huge game. This is a weird one for me when it comes to scoring of sequels, but man, I bought this game twice because it came out. This is the year it came out on Xbox 360. Their real new mechanic in this game was multiple protagonists.
Yeah.
And I don't remember. I think they did a good job of selling it on the fact that you could seamlessly switch between them in the middle of missions when they were all together. And I can vouch for the fact that that was done perfectly. First try, and it was like...
Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of one of those people that's of the opinion that Grand Theft Auto games can be kind of samey. Mm-hmm. And that's why I put Red Dead Redemption in together with them in a lot of ways. It's kind of just a different skin on the same one. Just like every Grand Theft Auto is just kind of a different skin on the same Grand Theft Auto. But like you said, the bringing in the new characters in this one with the 3 characters was a really cool mechanic. Trevor was...
He was unique. He outshined the other ones by quite a bit.
Probably one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Yeah. Very memorable. The voice actor, I don't know his name, but man, what a good job by that guy. He absolutely killed it.
Well, and I was thinking about Injustice, how I went to an actual comic book because the game did so well. Trevor is in the Walking Dead TV show, and I highly think it's because of his performance in this game. I don't know who that guy was before this video game, and then he's gotten roles in a lot of other things that are live movies or TV shows because of how good he pulled off.
I'm not going to say he carried this game, because I think this game would be good either way.
Yeah.
But, damn, this is like one of the best performances of all time for a video game actor.
I agree. Really, really good game, and again, it came out with the Xbox One. We're not going to talk about it again because that was maybe 2015 probably, maybe even later. But one thing I'll say is, even for Xbox One, I bought it again because I obviously had moved on to Xbox One, but they added a first-person view. That was literally... They found another way to make it not the exact same, even though it's the same game. They added a first-person, very in-depth way of playing. You couldn't do that before in Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun to try and play through the game in first person. So now we'll have a funny thing where that was 2013. I don't get another game on my list until 2017, and that is Resident Evil 7.
I'm very excited to talk about this game.
This, actually, I might be wrong. Feeling-wise, 2017 feels like the best year for me for how much I enjoyed games that year. But that's because it started off so strong, and Resident Evil 7 is. I remember being scared because so let's say explain this first. Resident Evil 7 is not only a return to survival horror, but they changed it because it's the 3D world. It's not fixed cameras, which the old Resident Evils were.
Mm-hmm.
But if they still achieved survival horror for the first time since being in fixed cameras, and it was now first person as well. And I actually prefer third person games for some reason, especially when I'm not creating my own character.
Yeah, me too.
And I actually was leery about this, but I saw some positives even before the game came out, and they were fulfilled because first person is way more horrifying.
That's true.
When you can't quickly see behind you or to your peripherals even.
Yeah.
Where somebody's going to swing at you and you don't know they're there until you get hit versus the hand coming down if you're in third person. It's terrifying.
This game is so good. And it comes out of like a thing where it's like, I didn't believe. You know? It was like, can Capcom make a good Resident Evil anymore? And I wasn't sure.
And as I don't know if when MVCI came out, but Capcom had been on not a positive trend.
Yeah.
This was, to me, their beginning of their turnaround. Where
for non-fighting games, every game from including Resident Evil 7 and current, they've been actually just killing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, not much else to say here, but although I feel like we've already said a lot, just extremely good game, very scary.
Great replayability. Scary in the way it should be. Yes, there's jump scares, but there's mental scares. There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Great. I think it's a great music. And return to a lot of nostalgic things that they made work in this new system. Yeah. Like when it comes to herbs and stuff that would be like, why the heck would you take an herb for health? They made it work in a really good way. This one was hard for me because I actually changed this a few times, and my rulings for scoring stuff changed a little bit because I was going to have Resident Evil 2 on this list. And I don't think it's bad to say this now. I don't have anything from 2019, but that's somewhat on purpose now. The couple stuff, Resident Evil 2 was one, and there was one other that I thought about doing, but I thought 2019, I don't think I could fairly add on there yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Too fresh.
Yeah. But Resident Evil 7, again, it was the beginning of that engine. It's literally perfect. It's good length of time to complete it. And that's, again, what I like about Resident Evil. The first playthrough is long, and then you can shorten it up pretty well. I love that about that franchise when it's been survival horror.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to say anything else. It's fun to watch people play it. It's fun to play with somebody else in the room. It's fun to watch somebody else in the room play it while you're there. It's hard to play by yourself in the dark, but no, it's very good. Also in 2017, we were at number 7, Breath of the Wild. Man, I don't know that I can even talk about this game without being spoilers. for my personal list.
Yeah. This is a game that if you would have told me it existed, like back when Skyward Sword came out, I don't know if I would have believed it.
Yep.
And I might even have said it was bad.
Here's the thing: Skyward Sword. We had said I wanted to play that so bad, but the controls wouldn't allow for me to do it. And when this first was teased and it was cell shaded, also I was like, well, shit, I'm done. Like I'm probably not gonna like this one very much.
Well, and if you had told me, hey, there's a new Zelda game coming out and it's got 5 dungeons.
Yeah, technically, yeah.
Maybe even 4, because Ganon's Castle, while you do have to or Hyrule Castle, even though you do have to climb up the top of it, it's not really like a dungeon.
It can be though. I would call it.
Okay, so if you said
depending on how you play the game, you could either get to it early on and if you know that. But like my first playthrough, it was a dungeon. The first time I went there, I went through the whole thing.
So there's 5 dungeons. If you're kind to Hyrule Castle.
Yeah.
If you told me this ahead of time, 5 dungeon Zelda.
But it also depends on. I would agree with that as a longtime Zelda player, but the game introducing all of the shrines, as mini dungeons, is kind of for me definitely balanced out by that.
I mean, in the end, after having played it, the game is phenomenal. I really like it. I
didn't think anything would ever touch Ocarina of Time for favorite Zelda for me. I didn't think anything would ever compare, especially after Skyward Sword. But I like Twilight Princess, but that didn't touch Ocarina of Time for me. This game came along, and everything new that they did, I liked, and that's including weapon durability. I know some people may not like that, but it was something new, and I think it was a good thing to try. I'm not saying it should be in the next game even necessarily, which it probably will be, but you know what I mean. And I'll talk about this more because I'm gonna have to. But I have at least, I might have 500 hours in the game between different profiles to replay it again. Which I can't say I've done that with a lot of non-MMO type games.
Yeah.
Ever. Moving on to 2018. This is actually number 8 here. So we've got Octopath Traveler. This was actually a late addition to mine. And that's because I made the mistake of thinking Dragon Age Origins was in this decade. It wasn't. So this replaced that for me.
You might not think this is possible, but when I say literally, I mean literal in the traditional sense. Literally got derailed for an hour talking about the music in this game when we were prepping for the video. Octopath Traveler. It's like Square calls it HD 2D. It's made to look like Super Nintendo game, but just with like really high quality. The art in this game is, I feel like it was a game made for me. Like, if they were like, hey, if we could, how do you want it to look? I'd be like this.
Yeah.
If they're like, how do you want the music to sound? I'd be like this. And they'd be like, well, how do you want the character customization to be? I'd be like, exactly like this. This game has like some flaws. Obviously, like the dungeon layouts are all samey.
Yeah, that's true.
But the major flaw for me, I talked about this when I reviewed it, but I'll talk about it now real quickly, is just that they added... So the game takes place, it's all 8 characters, they all have their individual stories, and then there's like a hidden side quest that leads to a final quest, or dungeon you would probably say. It leads to a final dungeon. And I feel like the dungeon, both by being hidden and by being like solidly 20 levels above every other piece of content in the game.
That's really actually, I forget about that.
Is like a huge mistake. I feel like players should be funneled here, and I feel like the difficulty should take place directly following the end difficulty of the 8 stories, because if you don't play this level, the story doesn't come across as nearly cohesive or as good as it does if you do play this chapter, and a lot of people didn't because it's hidden, and if you're not extremely online, you probably don't even know that it exists.
I think the problem I have with it was the level cap 80? Is that what it is?
It's probably 100, but I haven't gotten there. It slows down.
The problem is
the monster level cap is like 55.
Yeah, well, that's right. I'm forgiving
except
a lot
for
of that
this
stuff.
Final dungeon.
I agree with you, but even for me, I'm less harsh judging that, except for the gap in between what you have the ability to farm, and the level you should be at appropriately to do this content, and that really is my biggest flaw in the game. Which it's a phenomenal game, so it doesn't matter. And what I should say about the game is, this is not a game that I usually would play. And I have to be careful when I say that. It's not that I don't like the style. It's that when I was of the age when Super Nintendo, and even Nintendo, but Super Nintendo especially, was the thing, I didn't play these games. More because I didn't know they existed, or it's not like we had the internet today. Or
if I'm not mistaken, the only Square RPG you played before this was Vagrant Story.
I think so. Yeah, I can't think of anything else. And that's PlayStation.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. It's more... Back when Super Nintendo came out, I couldn't just walk into a store and buy whatever game I wanted. Plus, we didn't have the internet. Plus, all kinds of things. So, this kind of RPG was not my strength. I didn't know much about them. Like you just said, Vagrant Story is my first one, and that's not quite the same, anyways. Obviously, and unlike I said about Mario Rabbids, where I kind of gave people grief, I was listening to conversations of people that own the game, and like, man, they're sure talking about this a lot, but I have to kind of just glaze over this because I have no idea what they're talking about. And then finally, I came to a point where I had some time in a gap of time to buy a game, and I looked into it a little bit. I even watched gameplay of it, and I'm like, I don't know if I like this on Twitch.
Yeah.
And then I got the game, and I literally feel like I played it for 80 hours straight.
Yeah, so just to wrap up my complaints, I feel like the final dungeon hides both the story tie together. It wraps up the story and is very integral to the story, in my opinion. And it contains the best song in the entire game that you don't hear anywhere else. It's only in the final dungeon. And to hide that from the majority of players is just a huge mistake, in my opinion. But otherwise, everything about this game, I just love it.
And that's what I would agree. Coming into it, not knowing the genre super well, or mainly not having the experience of playing all the other games in this kind of genre, it just is insanely good to me. And this is part of my list here, was not only quality of the game itself, but how much time I actually spent in the game, lifetime-wise. That's another reason why
I'm actually shocked that Octopath is not on my list.
Well, and it's weird because when we went through that year,
I feel like I made a mistake.
I didn't put it in my game of the year for that year.
Yeah.
And that is a Red Dead Redemption 2 year, so technically that could... Red Dead Redemption, Red Dead 1 and 2 are the hard part about this list for me. But part of my ruling is 2019 is on here because a lot of my scoring was how much time I've spent in the game total since the game's existed. There hasn't been enough time in 2019 to do that.
Yeah.
This game, I spent, based on how many games I played in 2018, this game was up there. And yeah, I loved it from start to finish. I have tons of hours put into it. The only negative I did is I tried to start a brand new game after I pretty much 100%ed it too quickly. And I stopped. But yeah. And actually I miscounted. I think we're at number 10 right now. Let me double check. Yeah, I have one crossed out to say. So number 10 is Spider-Man PS4 in 2018. This game, we're not here to talk about comic books and Marvel in my life and stuff like that, but because of that, this game was going to be big for me. I have one negative thing to say about it, and that's the fact that it is a PS4 exclusive. That bothered the heck out of me, just because a lot of people aren't going to get to play this game that should have. But other than that, and that's not on the company itself, so when it comes to the actual game, this is the best Spider-Man game ever made, by far. It's the best, maybe one of the best Marvel games or superhero game. I don't think you could play, it's hard to say because I'm not trying to, a Thor game doesn't exist like this. I would love to play a game about Thor or, especially the X-Men, to where you have this much feel of you are playing the character. Mm-hmm. Before this, Spider-Man 2 was widely considered the best Spider-Man game, especially because of the web slinging mechanics.
Yeah.
This has phenomenal web slinging. This has real. I don't have a PS4 Pro, so again, I feel that's my. I wanted to buy that, but PS5 is coming out, kind of a thing. But even with a regular PlayStation 4, it looks really good. The combat does steal from Batman Arkham games, but that's the right choice. And the things that they change, aka countering in Batman, turned into dodging in Spider-Man, which fits Spider-Man, are perfect. And that combat to me in this type of game, especially for Spider-Man, is huge. And I mentioned this before, I like to be able to choreograph a cool looking fight and not use the same even combo or a couple specials over and over again. And this game allows you to get really creative with that, make some really cool clips. And it has a crazy good story, crazy good voice acting, a lot of good Easter eggs. It's got fun collectibles that aren't too tedious. I literally can't. The only bad thing I can say is not about the game, it's the exclusivity. I don't have another bad thing to say. They had, I think it's been all free deal. No, I don't remember how the cost. The DLC has been good with some free DLC as well.
Okay.
I can't clarify that well enough right now. And then last thing I'll say is that they've added to it. They didn't have New Game Plus right away, so that was a negative. They added that pretty quickly on. They added a difficulty, and I already had a game on the hardest difficulty previously. And again, like I mentioned about God of War, it gets pretty hard, and that is a good thing to me when you have the option to play it at that level too.
Interesting.
It's so in all around. So I don't have anything in 2019. My top 3. My number 1 game is Breath of the Wild for the decade. I don't. Based on all the things I was analyzing, that just has to. It is for me. And I know most people would probably think that's Marvel Heroes, but that's my number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not Marvel Heroes number 1 because it's really a tie. But in that regard, but I didn't want to have it be a tie. And it's kind of what you said about we don't have any other MMOs or long-term games as a service type of thing.
Yeah.
It's more if you don't really want to hear a game like Marvel Heroes as your number 1, then this is unanimous answer. But Marvel Heroes is very close up there. It's almost a different thing. It's almost a different breed, so it's hard for me to compare that. When I think it's almost like console game versus games as a service kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or console normal PC game. So yeah, Breath of the Wild scored graphics, gameplay, replayability, amount of time played. It's got the most wins in every of those categories. Marvel Heroes number 2 wins every other game on this list for time played by a landslide.
Well, that's
that's
a little unfair for
right,
game
and that's
service.
why I didn't only score it in that regard. Gameplay, replayability, same thing. That games of service usually should be winning that department.
There's just some things about Marvel Heroes. I feel like we've talked about this so much already, but it's just like taking Rogue as an example. There will never be a version of Rogue that's as much Rogue as it was in that game. This Rogue could combine the powers of all the other characters in the game to make a custom tool set.
Right.
And
let me say it like this too. This is game of the decade, and I'm almost feeling remorse for not having it be number 1, kind of similar to what you said about Octopath not being on your list, and that's only because I didn't put it 1 here. But if I said game of my lifetime, it could be number 1 because it's that good for all around things that I had fun with and how much time I had fun with it. But yeah, there's so many things in that game, and that's part of it is we won't see a game like that again. We won't see a Rogue like that again. There's another character too. Really, I don't think we'll see a Nightcrawler like that again, even though his was more about mouse and keyboard, so we might.
Juggernaut.
We won't see a Juggernaut
You
necessarily.
could probably not do
Yeah.
on console.
And Nightcrawler is the example that we did have on console. That I still liked him, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah.
Being able to blink to where you want to blink to is huge. But they had 62 or 63 characters on PC by the time the game had to be shut down. And every single character, some had to be reworked, but every single character felt good to me.
Yeah.
Including ones I don't care about.
Yeah.
And sometimes ones I didn't care about became my favorite to play as.
That happened to me for Magic. I didn't know who Magic was before they added her. But her like ranged demon summoner spec thing was really fun.
I don't know when the Necromancer came out in Diablo in comparison to when Magic came out, but all I know is I was like, man, if the Necromancer is anything like Magic, you just feel like you're super powerful with all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's what they needed to do. And that was the perfect way to have, and that wasn't the only way. You could play her without any demons. That's again, we could talk about this all day. They had so many options for how you could make the character.
Yeah.
Not build alone, but just rogue.
Yeah.
You could just play Ms. Marvel rogue if you wanted to, which is what I liked. But I still love the option that you could make 1,000 different variations of how she was built. And then so third on my overall list actually is Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
And it's, again, across the board, it was game-changing for the developer, really, but for the community. I played that so much over the course of a year and a half to 2 years. And it's just really... It's hard because Mortal Kombat 11 is actually a better game,
Yeah.
I would say. But it's just that game. I wouldn't have Mortal Kombat 11, which is supposed to play more like Mortal Kombat 9 if Mortal Kombat 9 didn't exist.
I just think, yeah, it's the same reason why I put them in my top 10. It's just, it really started something where they weren't going. Where Mortal Kombat 11 feels like, even though it's better in most ways, it feels like a natural progression, like where would you go if you were improving on it.
Well, like, think about the E-League in that, or the Combat League, I mean. It's way more accessible. The netcode is amazing.
Yeah.
Mortal Kombat 9, it was like training with weights on, because if you were playing it, everything was delayed by a second and a half, 2 back then.
Yeah.
So now that they have all those tools, they did what they needed to do to get there. It is a natural progression.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our games of the decade. Did you have any thoughts that we didn't discuss in the top 10 lists about
I
it?
don't think so.
Yeah, I think we were pretty thorough, so I really would rather just kind of wrap it up. But really appreciate anyone who did listen to the whole video. It's a lot longer than I had originally anticipated. The prep work was like a couple hours long, and I probably should have figured out from that
There's a lot of things. For me, it's hard to keep it short when I feel like I'm not doing justice to how much came out, and especially for the things that I'm passionate about. So it makes sense, but it is long.
Yeah, it's like when there's a game that I really like and I really want people to know, it's hard for me to just keep it to one or two sentences.
Yeah, it feels like you're doing a disservice.
Especially for the games I knew weren't going to make like my top 3. I didn't want people to think it's because they're bad. I mean, and obviously it's not, but I just want to be like, look, this game is really good for these reasons, because I'm not going to be able to talk about it later.
Right, yeah.
But,
what I would say is, if I know we're going to have this on YouTube and there's comments, so I think, and I'm dropping this on you last minute, not kind of last minute, I was thinking about it. It might be cool, we can't do this with every one of them, but it might be cool to do a playthrough of some of these games if people are interested.
Yeah.
As far as like at least our top 10 list.
Don't put Marvel Heroes on the list.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wish we could do that one. But every other game, I believe, at least on mine, is playable in some form that we could stream or record and do a video of.
If there's anything that we said, we could go on about it too long, so we can't really talk about it right now, leave a comment. That's definitely something that we'd be willing to talk about in another video. Anytime, if you heard about a game on the list that you haven't heard of before and you have questions, leave a comment. If you what's the best console to play this on, or I haven't heard of this game, you think I'd like it if I like X game, these are all good comments. If you want to leave your own top 10 list, that's a really good comment.
That would be huge, especially if you think we didn't touch on a notable game that you
really like. So if you want to get mad at us for not liking Naughty Dog games, that's also acceptable. But yeah, any comments are appreciated. So thank you for listening. Have a good night.
Thank you.